Welcome to Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Kieran Smith, positive psychology and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Michael Neuhaus, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Future of Flourishing, a futures thinking media, training and venture lab dedicated to bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and practical application in the field of human flourishing.
The Future of Flourishing is committed to creating a comprehensive ecosystem of communication and innovation platforms. Find out more about the Future of Flourishing at futureofflourishing.com.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.
Today's guest is Seph Fontane Pennock. Seph is the co-founder of Quenza and positivepsychology.com, two platforms dedicated to empowering mental health professionals with innovative tools and resources. Positivepsychology.com is a super popular resource hub that reaches millions of visitors every month. And Quenza is a software platform that streamlines personalised homework exercises, micro-coaching and interventions. Seph is also the author of The 7 Pillars of a Profitable Practice, in which he provides practical guidance for coaches and therapists to build and scale their practices using battle-tested strategies and tactics. Now, I personally know Seph through positivepsychology.com, for which I used to write and am now a scientific reviewer. Having said that, we never actually met in person, which is why I'm even more excited to have you here, Seph. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Micah. I'm doing great. I'm in my, as I showed you, in my impromptu podcast studio here in Sri Lanka.
I wish people could see your setup right now.
Yeah, we should add an image of it to the description. Yeah.
I was going to say we might even be able to add a photo to our socials of your temporary studio set up there, Seph, for everyone to see.
Exactly.
It's next level. That's fantastic.
No, I'm excited to speak with you, Michael, because we've been in touch for such a long time, like you said, and never really had a proper chance to sit down and talk. So the fact that this is like a live conversation immediately just adds to the excitement.
Yeah, awesome. So excited. Now, Seph, I'm curious because you're from a small country town in the Netherlands, right? And then you went on to build the biggest and best, if you ask me anyway, positive psychology platform in the world. Now, I'm aware that you know a thing or two about SEO, but that is insane. On top of that, of course, you've been traveling the world as a digital nomad for a few years, and you're currently calling in from the beaches of Sri Lanka. Life just seems too easy for you, doesn't it? But I'd love to know.
Yeah, if only.
Yeah.
No, I want to say if only that was the case. But yeah, it sounds great.
Right? I'm selling you well. Now, when you started your BBA, and obviously I'm curious to hear about, maybe what your struggles were. I guess that's what we're here to talk about, and your wins. But when you started your BBA back in the day, was creating tools in the human flourishing field always at the forefront of your mind, or what inspired you to start these businesses?
Yeah, I think the first point I would like to touch on is the BBA, or like an official degree itself. For me, it was really something I picked because it was naturally, I think, good at anything related to business, and I just wanted to spend as little time on my studies as possible. So that's why I went with my strengths in that sense, because I was busy doing a lot of other things. I was playing poker semi-professionally at the time.
Oh, wow.
Poker. And also doing more like self-studies. So I had like this whole program that I created for myself of the things that I wanted to learn that I didn't want to be a part of an official degree, because I thought that it would change my motivation. I was afraid that the motivation behind learning about these subjects would become more extrinsic instead of just coming from my own passion. So I've never really thought that degrees are a valuable way of getting where you want to go. It's always been more like an autodidact style for me, at least.
That is so interesting. And obviously, though, with that intrinsic motivation around, I guess, self-knowledge and basically maybe even flourishing is what you've created those businesses on? Or how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it came out of that creating my own program, in that I found Tal Ben-Shahar's Harvard course on positive psychology called the 1504 course, which I think is one of Harvard's most popular courses ever. I followed that. I remember downloading everything. I mean, back then you still had to download it. not necessarily in the most legal
onto a floppy
ways,
disk.
but I think they put it out there. Yeah. And those lectures were like an hour and 45 minutes, with no one right now has like the time or the attention span to get through. But I remember playing them in my living room, and I built like this kind of like whole study setup, and I would take notes, and I did all the readings as well. There was a whole syllabus included with all of the scientific like journal articles and the books that you could read that students at Harvard were also reading. So for me it was really cool, because I mean, I had no money back then, definitely not a track record good enough to study at Harvard, but the fact that I could still benefit from the same level of education and the same quality of education was mind-boggling to me. And that was back in 2010. I mean, right now, everyone is used to having online courses like the MOOCs, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, whatever, putting their materials up online. But back then, that was unheard of. So, what, you're studying a Harvard course? Like, how are you doing that, right? Yeah. This is like not that long ago, but it's like in terms of the development of the internet, it's like centuries ago.
It's crazy.
Because of, it was even like almost difficult to upload a video back then, or to publish a website or anything. Right now, we take all of that stuff for granted. Yeah. So I remember as the course was downloading, I remember I had this strong intuition, seeing like positive psychology 1504. It's like, I'm gonna make my career in this field. Wow. And that was just an intuition. It struck me out of nowhere. It's like, this is like the right. It's like personal development. It has the scientific aspect. It has a more like positive twist to it, which I found appealing, and it's about psychology, a topic that I already was deeply interested in, and that sprung from poker, from learning about body language, like reading other players and stuff like that. That was my gateway.
Oh God, psychology. That's so interesting. I was about to ask that, but it was a rhetorical question, because I never would have thought that was actually the motivation behind it. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's how it started. I started reading books about body language, and then through reading those books, and also books about like poker itself, the Texas Hold'em, I discovered like, oh, this is really cool, because I can actually just pick up these books, read them, study them, and then start applying all of these materials. And then I quickly, in my game and in the results, I quickly saw the results of doing that. And that to me has really ingrained in my brain of like, if you want to acquire a skill, or if you want to learn about a certain field, like, you have everything it takes to do it yourself. You don't need to go to a university. You don't need to do anything. Just get the books, do the reading, do the studying, start practicing, start applying it. Because most of these things are not spectator sports, and if you don't apply it, you lose it. And I've also always been a fan for that exact reason of just-in-time reading. Like, read about the things that you are in a position to apply right away. Because if it is relevant like 2 years in the future or something, you're not going to be able to apply it right now, and you're going to lose the lessons.
So true.
And if your behavior doesn't change from the things that you're reading, then like, why are you reading at all, right? Maybe for enjoyment, but so that's where it started. Let's put it like that.
And that's such a beautiful point that you made there too, around reading for the here and the now, that readiness to apply. And there's a beautiful quote, and I can't remember who it's actually attributed to, but it's it's that notion of, it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. And I think that, being able to obtain knowledge and then apply it, and then make mistakes thereafter, puts us in a really good spot if we can do that sort of on repeat. That notion of relearning, unlearning, relearning there, resonates quite deeply.
Exactly. And and I think one of the things I had to like relearn or unlearn was my relationship to books. Because during high school, and I wasn't a good student, I wasn't a motivated student at all in school. So I was just like more focused on doing my own thing. I really didn't like the school system. And I don't necessarily, it's the best way to learn for everyone, but let's leave that topic aside for now. I had to like change my relationship to books, because for me it was always something that I had to do. And this is coming back to that extrinsic motivation kind of stuff. My relationship with books was very extrinsic for that reason. It's like, oh, you need to do your math homework, you better open a book, or like your French or German. For that matter.
Entschuldigung.
Yeah, that was difficult. That was tough, Mike.
Oh, Seph, there's a couple of things that I've picked up very quickly here. The first, a similarity in that we both want to spend as little time in our studies as possible. That's a similarity, but a big difference is in the way in which we've played poker, I'm going to say, because I was not looking to read body language, maybe in the same way that you were, and probably should have been doing. So there's some good insights there for any future games that I endeavour to embark on now. But one of the things that I'm really curious about, you as Micah mentioned, you've created two very successful platforms that are helping, millions, I'm going to say, of individuals all over the world. What we're keen to know a little bit is, we see them as these hugely successful platforms. We want to dive a little bit deeper here and know a little bit of, behind the scenes here. When you were going through the processes of starting up either of those platforms, were there any times when you sort of either felt, a little bit isolated, maybe a bit financially strained, or maybe just a bit inadequate in the work that you were doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can take that journey from the start, which was like after following that Harvard course. I was reading a lot about it, and I met my current business partner, Hugo Alberts, and we were always talking about like, there seems to be like no real online platform or website that covers all of these topics in a user-friendly way. It was just like university web pages and some other stuff, but not like a valuable platform. So that's where the idea came from. It's like, there seems to be a gap there. And I had just shifted from doing playing poker, kind of like reached my goals there, maxed out, to building websites and experimenting a little bit with SEO, which was also, it had some similarities. It's also very analytical. There's like a technical aspect to it, which I really found enjoyable. So I built up some skills around that, and we identified this need, basically this gap in the market, where we said like, okay, let's build it. Or at least I started building the blog, and Hugo would start, like, as a university professor, he would start building some of his teaching materials and some courses, like transform them to like online materials. So that was the plan. That's where it started. And back then, in terms of like financial constraints, I only had like my student loan back then. That was my net worth, like a negative net worth. So from the start, there were definitely financial constraints. And we did everything ourselves in the beginning, like from design, building websites, doing SEO, writing the articles. I did myself in the beginning, but then quickly people in the Facebook groups started offering their help. And these were groups like from map programs, such as the one that you're in, or from University of Pennsylvania, or some other of the early map programs. Back then there were only like 3. I think there was like dozens of them now, of course, around the world. So these people started offering the help. So I basically started to manage a team of guest authors back then, and they were contributing for free. And I was just making sure that they were writing around keywords that people were actually searching for on Google. Micah just mentioned my background in SEO. I knew that this was super important. Like, you don't just start writing about anything that you like and start publishing it. If you're looking to serve other people, you want to make sure that there's actually a need for the content that you're creating. And one of the best ways to find that out is by doing keyword research, which I also find very fascinating, because it basically is like a window into the human psyche, or like global consciousness. Like, this is everything that's being searched for across the entire world. And you know exactly like the needs of people through looking at all of this data. And I've looked at that data so much in my life, and I've always found it really enjoyable. And sometimes it's like almost creepy to see what people are actually Googling for. But it's this wealth of data that's out there that you can use and leverage for business. And for me, it's the primary way I know of generating distribution and reach in a business, getting visitors to a website very concretely. And I almost want to say that I've been a one-trick pony in that sense, and I've always just doubled down on what works, done more SEO, stuck with that. And of course, there are some risks involved in doing so, because you're very dependent on the search engines, especially Google, which is also one of the reasons we'll get to that later, why we decided to sell the business last year.
I wish I had your drive and motivation and inspiration for keyword searches and so forth. I want to write an article. I just write the article and pop it up onto my blog, and it's like, someone will read it for sure. Don't think it works so well.
Yeah. No, the thing is, I think, without wanting to offend you at all, because this is how most people do it online, of course, in content creation, it's kind of like selfish if you think about it, because it's like what you're interested in, what you want to write about. But like starting from what are people actually looking for and literally searching for, and what is the search volume on a monthly basis for this, like how much need is there for this content, then looking at, is there already similar content out there that's satisfies that search intent or not, and if that's not the case, then you're actually like really adding new value to the internet, because you're creating something that there's a proven need for, and that's not out there yet. And I've always tried to fill in those gaps in our field, at least, because I'm like, I can't take responsibility for the field of biology or geology or like all of these other fields out there, an infinite amount of them. But I can take responsibility at least for the field of positive psychology, make sure to fill in all of those gaps. And that's exactly what we've done and what you've also done.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you just mentioned before, so you started just as a blog at home. It was the positive psychology program, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And on a student loan, you on your own, and it sort of developed slowly over time. And then you mentioned you recently sold it. So last year you sold it. So I still don't quite understand, apart from a student loan at the beginning and maybe some volunteer students who started reaching out from Penn Uni or whatever, what did you struggle with the most? Was it a struggle street at all at any point? And also what motivated you to sell it? Yeah. If you don't mind me asking it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The latter part I'll answer separately. I've also done a LinkedIn post on that, on like the 5 reasons why we decided to sell. I think the struggle part, that came later. So in the beginning, I was really driven by just this need to contribute, also the curiosity, and also just seeing like how far can I take this? Because, like, can I build the number one platform in the field? You know, of course, everyone in the field was always looking up to Martin Seligman and his amazing achievements. And I was like, okay, but like a lot of that is done through the academic route, through University of Pennsylvania, and of course also through the books that he wrote. But I was like, can I achieve something similar, but then online, basically through a website, through an online platform? Because I think it's a strong feeling that was going to be the future, and that people would just search for stuff and wanted to follow online courses, and then not everyone around the world can pay like I don't know how much it is, but like a University of Pennsylvania fee. Yeah, that's going to cost you like $2,000 for like 3-4 year program or something. Yeah, so there was also this need to kind of like democratize that knowledge, and also, by the way, for the scientific the journal articles, they're also paid. Like the access isn't free, right? So there's all this knowledge and all of these researchers working to acquire all of this knowledge, and then it's stored behind a locked gate. And it's like, not only do you have to pay for it, you have to know how and where to find it, which isn't always easy for people who are not in academia. You also then have to know how to interpret that and how to read it. And I don't know if you can still like remember the first time you read a scientific journal article, right? It's like, what is this? This might as well be Chinese, right? It's like P is this and alpha. I don't know, it's like impossible to interpret for just your average lay person. So I saw that we could contribute to taking all of that, especially with Hugo's as a professor at the University of Maastricht, the university in the southern part of the Netherlands, with his background. Like, we can take this and translate it to something that, lay people or people not academics are able to understand as well, apply in their lives, and also work with other people. because that was our main focus, was not to focus on the individual or on the client, but really on the practitioner. So on that level, if we are serving the professionals, then they can better serve their clients, and we have a bigger ripple effect that way. So for that reason, we've always been focused on the professional level.
That's incredible. So when did things start to get really hard?
Yeah, I think that was so we started, we launched our first product and started the site in 2013, launched first product in 2015. Then we gradually built a business around it. I went full-time on it, stopped my freelancing career. Hugo went full-time a year later because he had to quit his tenured professorship, of course, which was a big step with the wife and the mortgage and everything, and PhD students that he was running and stuff. So we both went full-time on it in 2018. That was when he joined me, and from that moment is that correct? Yeah, 18. And then we just started growing it into a business, and at some point I started experiencing some slight burnout symptoms. I was like, hey, I need to solve this. I'm doing a bit too much here. And that's when I decided to hire a CEO to take over everything from me. So I hired Lucinda back in 2020, right before COVID. She's been running things ever since, and she still is, with also with the new buyers right now. Yeah. So been very happy with that. I think I thought back then with my little burnout that I had, it wasn't anything too extreme, that those were tough times. But in hindsight, having really struggled with some health issues over the past 3 years, now I know what tough times are really like. Came to a point where I could no longer run Quenza. All I could still do was focus on the sale of positive psychology, but I didn't have really the capacity anymore to run Quenza. So I had to stop basically and pass that on to Hugo, those responsibilities, and the rest of the team, and just say guys, I need a time out. I can't do anything right now. And without going too deeply into it, it had to do with extremely low testosterone levels, and there was a medical reason for this, for which I was also operated. There was a very rare complication to that operation. So I was in a hospital in Germany actually for this, because I have private clinics there. In the Netherlands, it would take too long. And then there was an infection after the second operation again. So all in all, I've been in the hospital for about a month last year, alone in the middle of bumfuck nowhere in Germany. In the Ruhrgebiet, which was not a great experience. Yeah. And after that, it took me some time to recover, only to find out that none of the operations really worked, that it was all for nothing, essentially, and that the real problem wasn't solved, that it was something else, which was not only very costly, but extremely frustrating and painful to realize after having gone through all of that. At some point it came to the amputation of some body parts that as a man you don't want amputated, So that was really, really rough. So it went all of a sudden from having health and everything going for me to losing that health. And I remember seeing a sign in the doctor's office that says a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, a sick person only has one. And that's one of the lessons that stuck with me, because that's exactly how I was feeling as well. It's I don't care, take my money, take my business, take whatever I have. I just want to go back to the way things were before, with my body and with my health. And business had always been number one for me, my number one priority, but was really forced off the throne by all of this. And I just had to focus and reprioritize. And simultaneously, I was in the process, like I said, of selling the business. So I was, in different ways, I was just confronted with okay, what is your life really going to be about? What do you want to do here? Do you just want to keep going like you have been for the past well, it had been a decade, like exactly 10 years of building that. That's also 10 years of me spending most of my time in front of a computer, not really interacting with people that much because we had always been working virtually with our team. You know, do you want the next 10 years of your life to be like that as well? Like all of those sorts of questions came up. So I had to rethink of like, okay, what do I want my role in Quenza to be? Do I want to be the one operating this? Or do I also want to hire someone, appoint someone to take over the operations and be in it more as an investor? So everything basically in my life was placed into an existential perspective and came with like a question mark. And there were some other things that I was struggling with simultaneously. This was just one of them, but I had like some other big issues. I would say one of them psychological that I still haven't solved entirely yet. And that was like a problem that I couldn't sleep in my own house, in the house that I bought. And the first time, there was a clear reason for that. First time in Amsterdam, there was like mold in that house, essentially. And that was like terrible for my health. I had to sell it at a loss, yada yada. But then the second house I bought, I was experiencing also stress response from my body as soon as I entered the house, even though the trigger, like the mold, basically wasn't there anymore. But it was the programming in my mind was still like, oh, this is your house, this is unsafe, get out, get out, get out. So then I tried it 2 more times to sell that house, tried it another time because I thought there was something wrong with the house, only to later like find out that it was a mental thing, like a psychosomatic thing. The problem and consequence of that was that I've been living from hotels and Airbnbs now for the past 3 years. And before we started the recording, Mike, remember you said like it's so nice to be back in my own house, right? And to have like my own dedicated desk and can just leave all my stuff there. That's exactly like one of the feelings that I long for and have tried to build for four times now in the past 3 years. But that apparently is just not possible for me right now. So one of the things that I was doing like all this time with the medical stuff and with the house stuff was like I went to my coping mechanism, which has always been like action-based coping. It's like, okay, what is the problem? Identify potential solutions and just start taking action like crazy. Like today, make the to-do list. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Start ticking off all of these things from the to-do list, similar to the way I've been building my businesses, right? Because building a business is essentially just a never-ending series of problem solving.
Don't put it like that.
You have to learn to enjoy it, right? That's the thing. You have to learn to enjoy the problem.
It's a very good cognitive reframing there.
If Elon Musk didn't like the problem solving, he wouldn't be running all these incredible businesses, right? It's like you fall in love with that process and with that challenge because it
feel
alive. Makes you grow, and that's what's really exciting. Yeah, exactly. Because I wouldn't do something like positive psychology like from scratch, like again, because it would be a repeating of steps that I've already taken, right? And that ties into another reason why we decided to sell the business. It's like, is there still personal and professional growth for us in this? And the answer to that was no, because we've been like almost like a monkey, like doing the same trick over and over again for the past, I don't know how many years already. Was like launching more master classes, publishing more articles, doing more email marketing. It's like, we know how to do that. We've mastered that. I mean, like the website had 2 million organic visitors a month at its peak, which is quite insane. Yeah. So it's like, what are you gonna do? Just like more of the same? No. So that's why we decided to shift gears to building software, which is completely new for us. And I think every other day we ask ourselves, like, why don't we start doing this? Because it's definitely a harder game than info product marketing. But it is something that challenges us, and we've gone through, Hugo and I have gone through tremendous growth in the process of building this business, and there's still a lot more to learn. So anyway, that has been, I've thrown a lot at you guys right now.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm sure that's a very shortened version of it all. And first of all, I just want to commend you and say thank you for sharing all that deeply personal stuff. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it too, because I think, isn't that crazy? We go from, painting this picture, so sunshine and rainbows and butterflies, you as a digital nomad. And as you said, in the beginning, yes, I said, I've just finished my journey as a digital nomad and just resettled again. I had no idea, obviously, what was behind your journey. I thought you're just loving life, because if I could, I would have kept traveling at this stage. I can't right now for other reasons. But I just, want to say a deep thank you for sharing all that and being vulnerable like that. I think that's exactly why we wanted to have these chats, because I think there's not enough of this vulnerability out there, and everything just looks like sunshine and rainbows out there. And often the real stories behind it are paint a very different picture.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with that. That's also why I appreciate you guys doing this podcast, and why I wanted to be on board right away, because what can you do in life but really look each other in the eyes and grab each other by the shoulders and just admit that sometimes it's just super hard, right? And try to help each other where we can. And I think the more honest you are, the better, in a better position you are to help other people. So that's also why I'm happy to share anything and everything, because life is short. I'm gonna die at some point. If I can help some people while I'm here, then that's brilliant. That's all I can really do.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I have a million questions, and I'm probably going to forget about all of them in just a second. But one of the questions I had was, you mentioned that, in the first 10 years, I think, of positivepsychology.com, you had a little burnout. I think that's what you called it. Or, you started to get burnout. Where was the point until you actually had to step back? You had to hire a CEO, which is now Lucinda. You actually had to step back from Quenza at some stage too. When did you know? How did this creep in? When did you know? How did where was the tipping point where you knew, hang on a minute, I have burnout. Yeah. I have to now change things.
Good question. As you were asking it, I realized that it really started because I was doing a lot of things that I don't enjoy doing, and that I'm not necessarily naturally good at. So I for the book that I wrote, I started not only interviewing a lot of people, but also doing some coaching, some business coaching with practitioners. So with psychotherapists, psychologists, some executive coaches who had their own practice, because I was before I write this, I want to know whether, the strategies and tactics that I'm writing about, whether they work if I try to implement them one-on-one with someone. If I teach them and they start to implement this. So that's why I was doing a lot of coaching myself, only to discover, ironically, that I don't like it very much. Which is, I'm in a great position to help others do better at it with our tools and stuff, but it's not for me.
What was it about it that you didn't like? Do you want to share?
It's too slow for me. I'm really impatient, and I really like to get things done today. And the process is just too slow for me. And also I would be, remember the sailboat metaphor that we have throughout the products, right? It's the client is the captain on a sailboat basically, and as a practitioner, as a therapist, for instance, you're like the lighthouse illuminating the water around the client's boat so that they can have a better sense of where they're going, and can see the obstacles in the way and stuff like that. So that is the metaphor that we've always used. I don't know if you were familiar with it, Karen, but it's kind of the framework that Hugo always used. And for me, I wouldn't be like the lighthouse. I would be like that speedboat out in front, just trying to pull the boat of the client in a certain direction. Just do this, just do that, So I don't think that makes me very equipped, even though I still love studying psychotherapy, for instance. It's one of the things that I love reading most about. Irvin Yalom is my favorite author by far, and I always love to read about those things, or sometimes even watch movies about that topic. I'm still very fascinated by it, but so I was also doing a lot of other things like accounting, financial stuff, some legal stuff, that we just hadn't found the right people for back then, and we were still coming out of the mindset of like doing and out of the situation for having to do everything ourselves. So that was also a big process of learning that had to take place there for both me and my business partner. I was like, oh, we don't have to do everything ourselves anymore. We can hire people who are experts at this. You can just take it off our plates. And I think this like frugality of ours, it made the business really, really profitable because we were operating at a 76% profitability. And at the end of right now was like at a pretty big EBITDA, which is quite unheard of. But that all came from that bootstrap mentality of like, oh, why do we need to spend like 20K on a lawyer fee if we can have ChatGPT do it? Or like it's like always trying to save a buck here or there because that's where we came from. So yeah, there are some pros to that. Can make your business profitable, but the con is that you still end up doing a lot of stuff yourself that you don't have to do anymore. So balancing that has been really, really big for us.
That's so interesting, and that's awesome because it's almost like the perfect segue, because I was going to ask you, so what helped you navigate those challenges, right? And you were saying, well, with burnout, at some stage you were doing all these things, way too much of the same things, at the time. So obviously outsourcing, getting yourself some expertise into the house, learning that you could afford to do so. Anything else that's, obviously you shared some massive struggles before. What helps you with your biggest struggles in life?
Friendship. There are some incredible friends that I have, and they were there for me. It was actually interesting. Some of them that I would have expected to be there for me weren't there for me when I really needed them, and some of them of whom I didn't expect it at all were there for me like 100%. So it's interesting how that happens, and I've heard similar stories from other people who've gone through it, but like one of my best friend and his wife, they live in New York. Like when I was really at my lowest low, they were there for me like 100% of the time, unconditionally, just like listening to me, trying to enjoy the moment, trying to just being there for me in every possible way. So I'm eternally grateful for them for helping me through that period, because I was literally like in their New York apartment, like on the kitchen floor, just like bawling my eyes out at some point. That was like really my lowest low. And they did everything they could and like really helped me. And like a couple of weeks later, I was doing a lot better. And from there, I've been like on an upward trajectory again. But for me, it's not family. It's definitely like some key friendships that have always helped me through. And I'm saying that because some people find that same level of support in family, and to me that's true to up to a certain degree. But then it's the friendships that have really always done it for me.
Yeah, I can certainly share. It's been a similar thing for me. We've one of my kids was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. He's all fine now, but of course that was one of those moments, life-defining moments for me, also in my career and my personal life as well, and was absolutely the same thing. Some friends step up and they just got you, and others, family or friends whom you would have expected to be there for you, they're nowhere to be seen. It's like you can't blame anyone, I guess. It just revealed so much, and yeah, it's interesting.
And it's also not everyone like knows how to care like that for another person. Like, because some people would say like, I really want to help, but I just have no idea what to do. And I also took that at face value. It's like, okay, I see the intention is there, but they just literally don't know. And in a lot of cases, there also wasn't a concrete way for other people to contribute.
Absolutely, and they are scared. These topics are so sensitive, and they are so deep, and they are so heavy, and they so go, beyond your limits, that people are even too scared to even address the issue, to even ask how you are, because they're scared that you're going to fall apart in front of them and they don't know what to do. And so therefore, a lot of them don't even ask. And I guess for me, and that's one thing I always tell people since then, it never, ever, ever hurts to ask. Just ask. Just show up. You know, you will regret not having reached out, not having asked. But, you know, no one will ever blame you for having opened that can of worms, you know?
No, but there's a paradox there in what you're saying, because one of the things that people start doing as they're getting depressed or as they're really struggling with something is they start tightening their social circles and they start going out less. And they turn inward more. It's all about me and my problems. And I was also like this, and to a degree still. You know, it's like really the focus is really on the self. Like you never see this with the depressed person where the focus is on other people and on contributing. And no, it's always me, my problems, and wanting to fix that. So they start reaching out less and less to other people and want to literally stay inside and stay alone in their room more and more and more. Like they're retreating into their dark caves or something, right? So the person most in need of help is least likely to ask for it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have, or as a friend, what you can do is you can not just like ask the question like, how are you doing? But you can observe their behavior. I think that's more valuable. It's like, is anything like out of line or out of the ordinary? Or am I noticing something? And then instead of offering help or like trying to talk with them, just helping them and like pulling them out of it and saying like, okay, now it's enough and now we're gonna do this, and like taking the lead in that process. Instead of like offering or talking, it's like just dragging them out of that cave, basically. So being a bit more proactive when you see that a friend is not doing well or can use help, instead of like asking like, how can I help? Like maybe think about it yourself, or maybe discuss with the other close friends, coming up with a plan of like, no, this is how we are going to help, because this person probably doesn't even know what kind of help they need at the moment, right? Because they're so
and
stuck
doesn't want
mentally.
it if you're offering it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll try to like avoid it when offered. So yeah, those are some things that I've learned. Being in the exact seat of the people that I've always wanted to help with the platform. Like a depressed person suffering alone, like okay, needs some professional help, maybe, you know, okay, like we've always tried to contribute to that. But the funny and the ironic thing is, like, all the way at the end of my journey of selling positive psychology.com, 10 years later, that's when I really found out what it's like to be depressed. And that's the first time I realized what it feels like for these people that we've been trying to help.
Most definitely, and you've shared some incredible stories with us today, and some of the like I feel as though I'm writing down a lesson book for myself here as we chatting today on things that I can be working on and things that I want to be more attuned to. You know, I think the notion of relying and reaching out to those key quality relationships that we have with people, whether it be friends or family, is a big thing that's come through here. Knowing when's the time to move on to the next thing, or when's time to challenge myself a little bit more as well, sort of come out in your conversations as well. We obviously are going to have listeners that are very much at the start of their journey, maybe midway through the journey, or soaring, you know, through their journey. What we'd love to know is, you know, you've been there from starting off, you know, student loan to, you know, creating very successful platforms. Do you have any advice for people that, you know, whether they be leaders, coaches, or entrepreneurs that are, you know, facing those early challenges of starting up a business, and something that might sort of help them and guide them with that professional imaging that they might be sort of working to address?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you were asking this, I was reminded of something that a guy told me in a sauna once. This is when I was a lot younger, and my parents had just divorced, and I was like moving out of the house to go study and live on my own, and was like a bit down at that point. And the guy says, out of the blue, I was just sitting there in the sauna with him, the two of us alone, and we'd never met before, I'd never seen him before, and out of the blue he says like, "You can tell me." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" You know? And he's like, "Yeah, no, I can see it, you can tell me." And I started telling him about like all my struggles, yada yada, and he was like, "Let me stop you there. Before you continue, I want to tell you something that I want you to remember for the rest of your life." Like always take responsibility for your own life.
Wow.
And I just sat with that, and I've remembered that forever, and I've always tried to apply that. And why is this relevant to the question that you're asking me? It's like, I think your level of success is one-on-one, like there's like a causal connection there. It's not even a correlation, it's like causal, between the level of responsibility that you're willing to adopt. Because like I said, like building a business is like a never-ending stream of problem solving, essentially, or like of puzzles, if you will. You can also frame it like that. But it's like, okay, I don't know how to do this. Like, okay, well, have you asked AI how to do it? Like before you could Google it and you could learn a lot. Now there's no excuse anymore at all. You can just ask AI and it will tell you, right? Like there's nothing to hide behind anymore. So then it tells you how to do that. Okay, have you then implemented it, or have you like tried to get other people to implement it for you? Like there's, in solving all these puzzles and all of these problems, there's no excuses whatsoever. Some people, every excuse that there is, or every limitation, is something that your mind serves up to you and like tries to get you to believe and integrate that, and those are the exact things that are keeping you small. So I would say like the level of responsibility you're willing to take in that, to identify all of those steps. You know, you have a vision for a product or for a business. Okay, great. Chunk it down, identify all of those steps, and start attacking them every day, one by one. Boom, boom, boom. You can chunk those chunks down into smaller concrete steps that you can put on your to-do list for today. And there's absolutely no excuses for not doing this, right? Like I'm going back to what Michael was saying about publishing an article, something that you wrote, which may be helpful to other people, but like the step of you learning keyword research, it's very easy. It's like no one was born with this knowledge. There's no baby that has this knowledge instilled. There's no matrix program that's automatically downloaded. It's like you can Google it and you can learn it. So for me, that has always been my modus operandi as much as possible. And there's still a lot of self-overcoming in that, because I'm still running into the wall of my own limiting beliefs and my own excuses. I'm sure my unconscious has like a lot of reasons for serving that up and for trying to get me to believe it. And a lot of these reasons have to do with comfort and with automatic behaviors. Is like evolutionary, you're just like trying to do what you know how to do, what's like familiar, and also to get comfortable. I think to stay comfortable, and that's what it's focused on. But it's not necessarily focused on growth and taking risks and stuff. Especially if there's no reason to do that. If you have your meat on the table, then like why put yourself out there and risk for more meat? You know, there's no evolutionary reason for that. So in today's society, because we still have that hunter-gatherer brain, in today's society, I think it's really important to become aware of that and to override it, and you can do so by taking responsibility for everything, I believe.
Wow. How the world would be a different place if we all took responsibility for everything. And yeah, you're absolutely right. For me, it's a comfort thing. It's not something I want to do because I don't enjoy doing it. And there is just not enough pressure or reason for me to do it. And I guess, you know, years ago, I was always that kid who chose every single battle. I've learned to pick my battles. I don't choose every single one anymore. But sometimes I guess that plays against me. So I guess, yeah, that's really incredible advice. Really appreciate that.
I think,
Karen, is there anything?
Just to reply to that, I think for me, because I started out from the position of having nothing, I don't know if I would have been as driven and as motivated to build this if I had like inherited some money, or if my parents would have been rich.
Yeah.
So that's like an interesting concept as well. It's like the privilege of the underprivileged, Tal Ben-Shahar used to call that. And I do deeply believe that that's true. So but that's another conversation on like how you can leverage your underprivileged position in some aspects of life. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I can also relate to that. I'm curious to know, especially with your health challenges that you've had now in the more recent past, has that worked in favor to you in terms of your patience? Have you learned to become more patient and sort of deal with what life serves you when when you have to deal with it?
Yeah, that's a best question I think you could have asked. That's exactly like the process that I'm in right now, and I'm constantly like reminded of that in all sorts of different ways. Of like, my general mode was one of hurry, of like moving from one task immediately on to the next task, and I'm really consciously here trying to slow down and to do less things in a day, or even have this mentality, if I can just like do one little productive thing per day that moves the needle somehow, then that's already good enough. And that can take like half an hour or something, and then you can take the rest of the day off. There's been some forward momentum, and that's fine. So yeah, especially in that perspective of, wow, I could have like been gone or not be here anymore, if like had some really bigger issues, or remembering what that feels like to think those thoughts. Like everything becomes more relative, you know, and the things I'm trying to achieve with the businesses are also put into that perspective. And there's a lot of other things in life that are also super important, like your, you know, friends and other experiences that you can have in other countries that you can visit, and also like benefiting now that I'm in this position, like also trying to make the most of that. Like, look at all these opportunities that I have now. You know, why would I, you know, just limit myself to my laptop screen in my life for 8 or 10 hours a day, right? So those, for me, right now they're a lot of questions, but they're very clear and I can't escape them anymore, and I'm in the process of finding the answers to them.
Amazing. Seph, look, I think there's that mentality around approaching each day with almost like a set of to-dos and working out where to next, like what can I achieve today, and tackling that, but also giving yourself permission to stop after it too. I think that's a really healthy way of thinking about things too. I've really enjoyed today's conversation. It's been super fascinating for me to learn so much about your journey. You know, as someone who has absolutely loved, I must admit, I'm a big fan of positivepsychology.com, been following it for such a long time, resharing, using content from it I can't even begin to remember when I started using it all, but it's been so useful, and I know that for so many of our listeners, they're going to fall into that same category as well. It's safe to say that, you know, an original idea at one point and filling a gap in essentially the market has supported and helped so many people globally, which is an incredible and amazing feat. What our listeners are probably curious a little bit about now is what's next for you, and where can we find out what you're doing next? Where can we learn a little bit more about what you're up to now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for saying all that, Karen. I really appreciate it. And I think a platform to follow me would be LinkedIn. I'm currently writing an article series on the higher man, exploring Nietzsche's Übermensch, trying to take some bits from philosophy, from psychology, and some personal life lessons, and integrate that all into this series of posts that I'll be doing for the rest of the year. So I'm doing 3 posts a week. I started, I think, 2 days ago or something, that I'm scheduling all of that ahead. And I'm planning to turn that into a book at some point as well, kind of like a pragmatic idea of the Übermensch. So I'm really excited about that. Also, we'll be passionately building out Quenza, trying to build, or we're gonna build, the #1 coaching software in the space. I have some exciting news coming up later this year or next year. We'll see. But that's the plan for now. Meanwhile, trying to enjoy life as much as possible, and not take anything for granted that I get to experience in this position.
And obviously we'll link to all your socials in the show notes as well, so people can find you. Where are you off to next after Sri Lanka?
I think Thailand. I've never been before. I haven't really explored Southeast Asia much. We'd always go more to Latin America or the US that side. So I have a lot to explore here, and I'm excited to stay here for the next couple of months.
Wow, amazing. Well, Seph, it's been such an honor. Thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable and raw. Really appreciate that. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you and get to know you a little bit more. all the best for you, and thanks again for coming onto the show.
All the best for you guys as well. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you an amazing future with this show and this initiative, and that it may help a lot of people.
Wow, how was that for a conversation? I don't know about you, Karen, but I feel like I've been through a roller coaster just having that chat with Seph. That was absolutely incredible. And how raw was it?
So raw and incredibly inspiring too. You know, this is the purpose of the podcast, right? We see these people that we see them as hugely successful, and I think, as you mentioned in the conversation with Seph as well, butterflies and rainbows, like that's what we might see from the outside, but then there's these internal battles going on that we don't see, and that's often the reality. I think Seph mentioned it a couple of times there that like leading running a platform like this, it's just ongoing problem solving. I think he later corrected himself to working through puzzles, which I really like. It's a nicer, maybe a more gentle way of looking at it. But it's the reality too, though. We hear that so often too, right? It's just every day can look a little bit different, and I think Seph did a really good way of explaining that sometimes there were challenges with on work, but then sometimes there's also personal challenges that need to navigate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for me, what was interesting a bit earlier on in the conversation was how burnout crept in for him, probably without really him knowing. You're kind of driven and you have that goal. And it sounded as though at some stage he very consciously had to reconnect to his purpose of growth. And then also realizing, because I guess we forget about that and we come into this autopilot, probably in the beginning of positivepsychology.com, it was very much serving his why and his purpose, because he was building something and creating something he'd never done before. And at some stage, he was doing the same things all over again. He wasn't actually growing with it anymore. But it takes some time to actually realize that, I guess. And, and for him, the wake-up call, I guess, there was burnout. So I found that really interesting, that we constantly have to keep an eye on ourselves, especially as we run our own businesses, and readjust, Obviously, he was talking about outsourcing things and just, reconnecting to his own purpose.
Yeah, and if I could use almost the analogy that Seph used as well around, if there's meat on the table, you don't have to keep chasing more meat, like you've got food on the table.
Yeah.
But almost what he was saying was, I've got enough of the meat that's on the table. I want to try something a little bit different now to, feed that appetite a little bit. And, that notion of continued growth was very evident in his conversation, and, his desire to want to improve and learn more and do more is a real eye-opener for me, just like listening and hearing that. And it's like, this is why we need to embark on new challenges from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be incredible just to get a sneak peek into his mind, how his mind works. I find, the way he seems to digest books and write about pieces and learn, and even has that self-insight of, does he want to study psychology, or will it then become something that he's extrinsically motivated for? Or, I think that's incredible, the way he is connected to himself and understands himself, and then creates his own growth path, I guess. I found that very, very inspiring and very unique. I guess the other thing that was absolutely inspiring was to hear how life just threw these curveballs at him, and how he's been able to just deal with that. And what stood out for me was his call for and deep connection and unconditional love, even though those weren't terms he used, got him through it. And I guess that really resonated with me, because I feel as though every second day I say friendships are life. For me, it's the friendships, it's the family you choose, and it's really what keeps me alive. And we know, and I know this sounds shallow now, but we know from research, how important social well-being and deep connection, both to ourselves but also to others, is for our longevity, for our flourishing. It is so underestimated, though, isn't it?
Incredibly underestimated and often overlooked, I think. And, it is almost one of those self-care things that we just need to check in on ourselves and go, if I'm maybe feeling a little burnt out or a little bit like tired, maybe I need to reach out to somebody to re-energize and reconnect. And just having those connections and checking in with people to make sure that, I'm there for you and you're there for me, can be really, really valuable just to keep us going on the day to day as well. I know that personally, I've got people in my life that, friends and family that, I'll reach out to in certain times, sometimes selfishly, to just check in and say, hey, how are things going? Because I almost want the question back, right? To just open and start the conversation. But, being able to rely on and have those quality relationships is so incredibly important. And that was so evident in Zeph's journey to helping him navigate and cope with some of those challenges, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to pick up on what you just said before, sometimes almost selfishly you said, you'll call them and ask them how they are because you almost want the question back. But I think there shouldn't be any shame to that. It's the opposite, it's that whole idea of give and take, It's so fine to call someone and just have a chat because you need it, not only just because you think they might need it. I guess we all need to do better in that regard, that we reach out to others when maybe we feel disconnected or when we maybe have an experience of being lonely or whatever that might be. We don't need a reason for that either. So I think this whole idea of give and take in relationships, no matter what kind of relationships, is really, really important. And I also loved how he said, because I don't know if I've ever heard anyone else say something to that extent, is that whole idea of when someone is struggling. I mean, here we are about, talking about depression, to really take initiative. Even when they say, I don't want to, or no thanks, or whatever, to say, no, I've been observing, and we just go, we'll do that thing, let's go for a walk, or I don't know, whatever that might be for that person in that context. But just to really be persistent, because what that person might do in that moment is just to retract naturally and not want to have any contact with anyone else, and not to take that as an offense, but more so as a warning sign to maybe even be a little bit more persistent. It's hard to find that balance though, isn't it? Because you don't want to be a pain in the ass either.
Absolutely, incredibly hard to find that that balance. And it is that notion. Sometimes, just rocking up to a mate's place with a meal or something like that, and just being in their company for a little bit of time, they might not even realise that they need it. And you might be delivering the most nutritious meal that they've had for a while or something like that too. You just never know what people are experiencing when they're in a bit of a slump. So I do like that idea of being more observant as opposed to just asking the question as well. I think it's still okay to ask the question, but also that notion of being observant is really important too.
Is there any particular takeaway you've taken from this conversation with Seph?
Yeah, I had one that I found really interesting, and Seph mentioned it quite early on when he was talking about, what led to the creation of positivepsychology.com, and I was super fascinated by it, and it makes total sense. And I think it comes from that SEO mindset and brain that Seph's got, which is incredible. But he was talking about, essentially find the gap in the market in the area that you're passionate in and fill the gap. And I think for our listeners, that's a great little takeaway to sort of, and for me as well, I was sort of like, oh, okay, where's the gap? Am I filling a gap? And I'd like to think that we're filling a gap here, but even in the work that I'm doing, also in the elevator, trying to figure out where are the gaps that I can be filling that still relate to what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does it so very analytically, doesn't he, though? Like, he literally looks at keyword searches and so forth. And I guess I always feel very lost in that. And of course, we've done our market research. Is there a podcast like this one out there already, talking about these things and these struggles and so forth? And we find that there just isn't enough of that out there. But have we missed something? I don't know. I'm never 100% sure about that. I guess for me, a big key takeaway is also what he said about taking responsibility. That I'm guessing in a very self-compassionate way he meant it, that there are no excuses really, ever. And I guess even though I would love to say that I've lived my life like that, that's why I'm so passionate about self-leadership. I guess for me also it's a great reminder, every now and then, there are things I put off or things I don't do properly. Just to know that these days, really, there's nothing you can't possibly do or achieve, because I feel like for most of us, and probably most of our listeners, I don't know, I feel like most of us are so privileged. We have all the tools and resources in the world to get out of our own way. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement there as well. And that was also a great point that Seph mentioned, which I really resonated with as well. And I could just imagine, all of the connections that he was making as he was saying that, all the times that he's needed to do that. And there'd be so many of them as well. So incredible just to tap into that. I think we've been really fortunate to have such an incredible guest in Seph on the show and share some great insights with us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's been absolutely incredible to have Seph on the show. I feel so humbled for him to have joined us, and I guess those chats are exactly why we created the show in the first place. So I really had a blast.
As did I. Such a great conversation. Looking forward to our next one.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite, to let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realise your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate, and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.